So when Mendel made all of these crosses, he started to observe several patterns in both the first and second generations of these crosses. So first up, really the important one was when he got to the F2 traits. Okay, so here we have each of the 7 traits listed out. Okay, and you can see that like in P shape, you have a certain number of round plants, you have a certain number of wrinkled, and so on and so forth. Okay, so it's all recorded here. Now, what's really important when you look at this table, okay, is to look over here at the ratio. Okay, so what you can see is that all of these ratios are almost exactly 3 to 1. Okay, there is, of course, some discrepancy, right, but it works out to roughly 3 to 1 for every single one of these traits. Okay, now that's really significant, especially as you see it time and time again, and you see it with all 7 of these traits. It's all 3 to 1. Means that if in the F2 generation, okay, you're going to get, out of every 4 plants, you're going to get 3 of them that produce round peas and 1 that produces wrinkled. You're going to get 3 of them that produce yellow peas and 1 that produces green. 3 that produce purple flowers and 1 that produces white, and so on and so forth. Okay, so it always lines up that way. So Mendel drew 3 important conclusions from that. Okay, the first is that traits are inherited as those discrete units that we talked about earlier. In this case, we'll go ahead and call them genes. Okay, so the genes, this is a little bit of a technical thing, but you've got genes are the specific trait. Okay, alleles are the different variations that that trait can take. Okay, so for example, here in this example here, we have the gene for flower color. Okay, and this chromosome right here has the allele for purple flowers. Well, this chromosome right here has the allele for white flowers. Okay, so the gene is for flower color, and then the allele is the different variations of that gene. So organisms also inherit 2 copies of each gene, 1 from each parent. So this is where the homologous chromosomes come into play that we learned about in the last section, the last 2 sections. Okay, the homologous chromosomes have the same genes on them. They just have different alleles. Okay, so they have the same type of genetic information, just different variations, right? So you can see here that the allele for a purple flower came from one parent, while the allele for the white flower came from a different parent. And then the third observation he made was that the two copies segregate during gamete formation. Okay, so each gamete only gets 1 copy, and this goes into the homologous chromosomes separating. Okay, so during meiosis 1, you get your homologous chromosomes separating, you go down to haploid. So there's only 1 copy of each chromosome, and thus only 1 copy of each gene. Now when you get fertilization and the 2 cells come back together, that's when you go back up to diploid and you get the 2 copies. Okay, but this is basically saying that for all of the genes and everything, all of the chromosomes in the cell, the only thing that really matters is that each new cell gets 1 copy of each homologous chromosome. Okay, it doesn't matter which copy of chromosome 1 goes with which copy of chromosome 2. Okay, that's kind of what it's saying. And we talked about this a little bit before when we were talking about it doesn't matter if the chromosome from the mom lines up on the bottom, which one lines up next to it, if it's a chromosome from the mom or the dad. Okay, that kind of thing. That makes sense. So the last 2 of these conclusions combine to form the law of segregation. Now, Mendel also realized that because you have that 3 to 1 ratio, when you're talking about how the genes present themselves, okay, there's also something called dominance and recessiveness that we're going to get into in the next section. Okay, so basically the one that is more frequent in the F2 generation is the dominant allele, and the one that is less frequent is the recessive allele. Okay, so dominant will always express, recessive will only express if there is not a dominant allele as well. Okay, so we're going to get more into that in the next section, but for right now, this is over. Maybe.